Hello everybody, thank you all for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to show you guys a few tips and tricks when it comes to setting background images using CSS. So without further ado, let's dig into the code. Okay, so I have a codepen sample here. You can find a link to this codepen in the description below. And I basically just have some sections laid out in it with various background images. And you have section tags here, 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 here on the HTML code. We have CSS here, and we even have a little bit of JavaScript, which kind of helps just be able to navigate through and do a little color changing effect that I'm going to show a little later on. And with that JavaScript that I mentioned, you can also hit the escape key just to hide the text headings that are in each section, but I just kind of put them in there just to kind of give a cool little fun theme to go along with this background image code sample. So let's start first by focusing on the CSS here for this section here. So I'm going to scroll up to the top. I've got some basic styling here, one bringing in a certain font for this, and then scroll behavior smooth just so we can navigate more smoothly. I've got some CSS variables defined for just some color changes, different color themes, and then some basic root styling just for border box, getting rid of margins. And if we go down here for those sections, I've got some CSS for those. I'm just doing a display flex just to kind of center up this text with the justify content center here, keep this text in the middle as I was mentioning. And then I also, over here, I have some before and after, which you have to use pretty much in order to get those pseudo elements to display. I just basically set them to absolute positioning just so they can kind of layer sort of underneath each of the sections and, you know, span the same width, be the same size as the section container itself. And then also with some styling here with the before, I set the background size to cover and just set up the position to center up without any repeats, and then did some Z indexing here, and then set a Z index on the after as well, since I'm using both the before and after for setting these background images. Okay, so you have this before and after thing with these pseudo elements that you've added in. But why not just keep it simple and just set all those properties right in that section container div itself? Well, let me show you something. The reason I decided to use the before and after pseudo elements when it came to setting these background images is because I didn't want the content to be altered with any changes I make with background images or with colors, especially with certain effects or certain mutations. And I'll explain to you what I mean right here. So if you see this right here for this background 1, which is this unsplash image, which is this sort of, you know, inside spaceship image that you're seeing. If I were to apply, say, a transform, let's say, let's just do a skew of, say, 55 degrees. Have that, it's skewing there, and then, hey, let's just do a scale so it kind of fills in that space. I have the, one thing I forgot to mention, I do have it set on overflow, so nothing will overflow past. But coming back to that background one before, as you can see, I can apply effect where I'm sort of skewing the image and then, you know, scaling it to fit. But if I were just to apply this straight on the container itself, then it also affects the content with it. So certain things like color blend or any kind of skewing or any kind of transform could inadvertently alter your content. So having this before, you're essentially setting it up on another layer underneath the content, and therefore you're not going to alter your content. Think of it like having layers in Photoshop. You wouldn't want to alter something on that same layer that the content is in or your text is in, because it would skew it and alter it. So that's pretty much how this first section that you see here is set up. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that transform, let it go back to the way it was. And then we're going to move on to the next section that I made. And you can actually navigate between sections by hitting just the numbers on your keypad. There's 4 sections, so you can go to 1, hit 2, 3, and 4. But let's go back to 2 here. And I pretty much have just an image of the Earth here, what the real view looks like without colors. And I'll hit escape on this one just so you can see the background images a little better. So this next section background image that you see here is just a nice little view of the Earth here. This one I did a little differently from the first one, aside from the obvious background image. And I did set it to be a little fixed because, hey, I want to simulate what it looks like looking out, say, a window here. So, you had this first section that we showed, and then when I scroll on here, I've set the background attachment to fixed, which basically will position it relative to the window. And since the window's pretty much locked, in place, the window's not really moving as I scroll, that pretty much makes it stay sort of just locked in place there, with the scroll not having any effect on it. Well, that's a pretty cool view of the Earth from, say, the International Space Station. But we could perhaps spice that up even further, per se, add a little color blend to that. Well, let me show you something. So this section with the background image of the Earth, it's not too much different as far as CSS-wise from this first section up here, aside from, as I was mentioning, a different background image and background attachment fixed. But I want to move on to the next section here, which is pretty much the same image, but I'm going a step further and actually adding a color blend to it. And if we look at the section here, actually I can turn this text back on. So this section here where it says let's add some colors, I've got this section container, your basic styling, and then I have a class of background 2, which was that same one that we saw on this second one here. But now I actually have another class on here which didn't have on the previous one, which is background color 1. And background color 1 uses the after pseudo selector. And there I use a linear gradient color blend of 45 degrees using CSS variables with opacity of 0.75 and a mix blend mode of multiply. And there's various ones you could use. You could use, say, color. So if you want something a little bit brighter, such as that, but we'll just go to multiply. There's various properties for mix blend mode. You could always Google that. And in fact, I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And going back to those color blends that you saw here with these variables, those were actually up here. I believe I touched on it earlier on in this video. CSS variables right here for color change 1, color change 2. You have these other ones that I'll show you what they do a little later on. But those are right there for, sorry about that, for these colors right here. And I'll just scroll back here. So basically we have using the before to set the background image and then the after to set any color blending I want to do over there. As you see, I use this mix blend mode of multiply. And just to go back up here with these z indexes, that's the reason I set these the way I did. So the negative zx of 2, or negative 2 I mean, actually is 2 layers below the main content layer. And then the after is -1, which is 1 layer below the content. So the before is down on the lowest layer for the background image, and then for the after I set it to be 1 layer just above that, so then we could do that color blend like you're seeing right here. Well, hey, that's a pretty good color blending effect that we've made there. But perhaps we could spice it up even further, say make some color changes, a little bit like the Aurora Borealis on steroids. Well, let me show you something. So let's move on to the final section that I have in this CodePen here. I'm just going to hit the number 4. And I'll just show you real quick that, this is a different section. This is the text, that I was showing on each one that you saw before. And this section, I'm actually using JavaScript to change the colors so we can get kind of a cool animation. So, I'm using a lot of the same techniques with the before for the image and then the after to set, a color with a mixed blend mode on the after pseudo selector. But I kind of wanted to show this just as a little bonus of what the capabilities are and what the possibilities are for, doing animation, or in this case, a color changing effect. This gives kind of a cool, almost Aurora Borealis rainbowy look. So I'll kind of show you what I've done here. So you have this background color to after, which is being applied on this last section here, along with that background to, which was the same image that we saw up on here on the second and third one. Third one having just a static color blend, and now this one having a dynamic color changing effect. So that's just, setting what the opacity is. We could always set this to go, say, lower, and it goes there. Or we could just go greater, various things like that. But anyhow, we take this off. So you're probably wondering, how is this color changing happening? So if you notice here, I've got two variables, change one, change two, a bit like what I had up here for this previous one, but they're obviously different ones. And you notice how they're just sort of set to 0 here, so which would, by default just be dark. But let me show you why those color changes are happening. So if we come back down here, this JavaScript is the reason why. I've set some variables here with a function that runs. It keeps getting called, constantly about every 1/10 of a second. This is in milliseconds, so 100 milliseconds is 1/10 of a second. And I'm basically selecting those CSS properties, and they're being dynamically changed. So every 1/10 of a second, it's either incrementing or decrementing the H value, as you can see right here, which refers to the hue. And there's various techniques you can do here, but this is just what I decided to do. But just to give you guys kind of an idea of how you can use JavaScript to alter CSS variables and get sort of a cool effect like you're seeing right here. Okay, so that pretty much summarizes what I wanted to show in this video when it came to setting background images and color blends, and even that color animation you saw where we took the Aurora Borealis and basically put it on steroids. But I hope you guys learned something in this, and I do have a link to this codepen in the description below, so feel free to take a look at it, copy it, play around, and hopefully you'll learn a thing or two to spice up, say, a section of a web page. Thank you so much for watching.